I'd like you to think back to that very first time that somebody told you, never use flashbacks. You see the problem here? A surprising number of writers that I've worked with have told me they had teachers who were really insistent that flashbacks were instant script killers. I mean, no kidding around, these writers were afraid to use flashbacks. So I am here to cast off the shame and fear that has been instilled in those of you who want to flash back now and then. As I understand it, the theoretical argument is that flashbacks stop the forward motion of the story. And sure, a bad flashback will do that because a flashback is a storytelling device. It's a tool. A tool is not bad, it's how you use it. The obvious problem with the flashbacks ruin stories theory is how do you explain Casablanca, The Manchurian Candidate, Midnight Cowboy, Perks of Being a Wallflower, While You Were Sleeping, The Revenant, Mad Men, Better Call Saul, Black Monday, The Handmaid's Tale, Mr. Robot, BoJack Horseman, and Euphoria. It's a Wonderful Life is like 50% flashbacks. And there's a phenomenal flashback bit in The Hudsucker Proxy involving Paul Newman's sleeve. Now, sometimes, of course, flashbacks are a bad idea. In Thelma and Louise, it would have been a real mistake to show us what happened back in Texas. The point is, clearly, flashbacks are not inherently bad. So the real question becomes, how do you make flashbacks work? Okay, before we go any further, it's really important to break down two different types of flashback. Subjective or objective flashbacks, also known as a character flashback or an audience flashback. In a character flashback, the character is the one who is seeing or remembering or thinking about the past event. In an objective or audience flashback, the movie itself is showing us, the audience, a past event, but the characters have no idea that that's happening. Obviously, those are very different, and you make them work in very different ways. When the character is having the flashback, you need to make sure there's a reason within their story for that memory to come to them at that moment, which does not mean that you always have to provide a very obvious, visible trigger. It could be that they're just in a moment of reflection. And yes, you are allowed to slow down the forward movement of the story. A story needs dynamics, changes in the pace and tone. If you keep every scene at the exact same high pitch and intensity, you turn into Michael Bay. Not sorry. Now, the other thing you need to make a character flashback work is it has to have an effect on the character. It has to give them useful information, or push them to do something, or make them afraid to do something. It has to change something in the character and the story. When the audience is having the flashback, you have to be sure the storytelling language of the movie allows for leaving the flow and experience of the characters. You can rarely just break the fourth wall or step outside the action just one time for no reason. And it has to matter. It has to make a difference. When you bring the past into the story, it ought to be a revelation, a turning point. Everything that happens after it means something new because of what we now know. So overall, the best rule for making flashbacks work is actually pretty simple. A good flashback is an event in the present story. Dramatically, as in life, the past is usually felt because something happens in the present to make us think about it, or because we have some need to use the past for some purpose in the present. Now let's talk about a few tricks of the trade, flashback-wise. Flashbacks are kind of like zombies. There's fast ones or slow ones, and you gotta know how each kind operates. Fast flashbacks are often just images, very quick flashes, that try to capture the experience of what it's like to be in someone's mind when a memory strikes. So fast flashbacks are almost always subjective. They're happening to the character, and they happen within a scene. Slow flashbacks are when you actually leave the present timeline to have a full scene or sequence set in the past. And when you do that, a flashback scene is still a scene. We have to go into it because somebody wants something and something has to happen during it. A flashback is always a specific moment. It can't be a summary, a generalization. If you're using it to show a long history or a general condition, think about how to make that into moments. If you want to say the family was always happy until they had to move off the farm, you can't point the camera at always happy. Actors can't act always happy. It's got to be a specific moment and an action of happiness. Now, a great use of flashbacks is to break them up into smaller pieces and drop them into the story slowly, bit by bit. This kind of flashback actually adds suspense to the story. The important thing about these broken up kind of flashbacks is that you make clear to the audience within the flashback that it is incomplete, that there is going to be more. Maybe break it off at an awkward spot or give a sense that something else is coming. And then when you come back to it in the next section, often it's a good idea to repeat a piece of it so that the audience can remember it and connect the dots. Sometimes you flash back to events we have already seen in the story because the character is suddenly seeing that moment in a new way. Or sometimes you just do it to remind the character or the audience of some detail that's relevant to the present moment. But as cool as flashbacks can be, what if they don't fit your script? What if they don't work with the structure or the tone of your story? Here are two useful alternatives to flashbacks. The first one is characters talking about the past. This can really work. A powerful talk or monologue about the past is killer. You can't handle the truth. My sister, my daughter, my sister, my daughter. And the other great tool is a mechanical information device. Internet searches, looking up a news clipping, old film or video, audio recordings, old photos or souvenirs. It's been done to death, but used right, it can really work. Those alternatives are really good ways to bring the past into a script. But if you ask me, a flashback is often the best tool to really feel the past, to get into the drama and character of a moment that happened before the script started. You decide. Do what's best for you and your script. I'm just here to say, don't fear the flashback. It's a useful tool. Just flashback responsibly. All right, that's enough for now. Go write something. If you like this video and subscribe to this channel. And if you want to ask me a question or work with me on one of your projects one-on-one, go to writingforscreens.com. But there is, obviously, those have very, obviously you have to think very differently. Obviously, those are very different. Obviously, those very different experiences. Obviously, those very different ideas. Obviously, I don't know what I'm saying here. Those are really good ways to bring those can truly work. Those can really work. This is what happens when you don't write your script precisely enough.